Well, hello. This is Jason Gaston. I have done my literature review, and now I'm presenting it to you in the class of classical rhetoric and to Dr. Knight. My literature review and presentation is titled Themes of Rhetoric and Christian Preaching. This paper operates under the belief that rhetoric isn't aimless, but also not for personal gain. In fact, Mark Williams, who we've been reading as a class, his book, Just Words, he writes in his book, true rhetoric is saddled with the inexhaustible task of explicating the divine. As a Christian myself, I understand rhetoric is a gift from the Christian God and is most pure and most true when it is exercised in such a way as the early church fathers did, and that is to communicate the profound and fundamental truths of God, His ways, and His world. In the beginning of my paper, I spend sort of a delimitation paragraph or so to go through basically three major just foundational aspects of the paper. And so the first is how we as a classical rhetoric class, are defining rhetoric, and as rhetoric is the use of symbolic action by human beings to share ideas, enabling them to work together to make decisions about matters of common concern to construct social reality. So as we thinking about it, I have 3 bracelets on right now. I have a telly tie, a bracelet by the International Mission Board, which says no matter the cost, and a bracelet by Reaching and Teaching, which has Pray for Tokyo. So these, not only do these 3 bracelets mean something and speak to something about the organization, but they also speak to me about who I am. I'm hopefully praying for Tokyo and supporting whatever is going on in Tokyo. I'm supporting the International Mission Board, and I'm taking their slogan and their motto, no matter the cost, and making that a part of my life. No matter the cost, I'm following Christ, no matter the cost, wherever it leads me. And then the bracelet can either mean that I'm weird and like to put my hair up, or I have a girlfriend. And so it's the girlfriend thing, don't worry. And there's other examples of symbols in which we use in our lives. The shirt I'm wearing right now, the colors and the schemes around in the room that you're currently in, the letters D-O-G that we assign to a creature, the huge big walls of a church that speak to the huge big mighty God, right? All those things relate and interact with each other as we relate to interact with each other and feed off of each other and influence each other, and we're slowly constructing our reality, how we perceive things. The second thing that the paper assumes or requires for the paper is that the paper is looking at writings within the early church. And so we define the early church as the period between 33 AD, which is roughly around the death of Jesus of Nazareth, and 500 AD. And then the third thing is the foundational paper that I use, foundational research paper that I use for my research is a paper by Ed Lamore, who claims that there are 4 types of rhetoric in early church writings. The first type of rhetoric is apologetic rhetoric. Now, this is rhetoric that is used to persuade non-Christians to join the faith. Brian Holland calls this type of literature an exhortative address with deliberate purpose. And so the 2 examples that I give is one is a paper by Bart Bueller, who is a professor at Indiana Wesleyan University, who is looking at this passage in Luke, and looking at the ethos that the author Luke is trying to create in the characters. And so Bueller argues that Luke is writing to prove to first century readers that Jesus is God incarnate and Mary did give birth to him. In fact, Luke 1:4 says he is writing so that you may know the exact truth about the things you have been taught. So Bueller is arguing that Luke is writing to gain credibility for Mary and gain credibility for Jesus and the circumstances around his birth, proving that he is God incarnate. Now, the second example that I give is the epistle to Diognetus. Now, there's a lot of background information that's kind of up for debate among scholars about this epistle. However, all that is irrelevant to this presentation. The main point is that this epistle contrasts Christianity with pagans and Judaism, and is considered by many church historians and rhetoricians an example of elegant and rigorous argumentation relevant for any student of rhetoric to study. Now, the third example of rhetoric is polemic rhetoric. Polemic rhetoric is simply rhetoric in doctrine. It's primarily used to defend against false teachers. And since we're looking at this type of rhetoric within the early church, we're often looking at writings and rhetoric that ultimately paves the way for orthodoxy within the Christian church. To me, as I'm doing this research and I'm reading these papers and writing my paper and doing this presentation, I'm reminded of a verse in Jude where he exhorts believers to contend earnestly for the faith which was once for all delivered to the saints. Now, the two examples I give. Now, the first one is Irenaeus, who is famous for fighting against Gnostic interpretations. Now, Gnostics or Gnosticism was the idea, or people who believed that they received special divine revelation, different from what the Bible taught and different from what the church was teaching, which led to them participating in a lot of weird practices and beliefs. Irenaeus has been historically criticized. However, the historian Thomas Ferguson contends and assures that the truth, big T, the truth, remains a foundational element of all his writings. And then the second example is speaking to creeds. Creeds is very foundational to the church, and especially to the early church period. The creed that I give is the Nicene Creed, which was a response to the Arianism heresy, and given a picture of St. Nicholas, who allegedly slapped Arius for his heretical views. And there are other important creeds that are probably worth noting at this point too. The next example of rhetoric is preaching rhetoric. Now, this is rhetoric that is the particular teaching of new believers in the way of Christ for the purpose of strengthening the church, primarily amid suffering and pain. Now, I really love this example the most, and found this paper and this investigation, this part of my investigation, to be the most exciting and interesting. And that's about naked baptism. You're reading this right, it's naked baptism. And so I found this investigation by Lori Guy, who's a scholar, and who was noticing references in the early church documents to naked baptism. Now, Lori Guy found that people who are becoming believers, new believers, these people, sinners, they are to be baptized. It had to go through a process. And so these sinners, as he puts it, as the guy puts it, must be resolved to Christians, spend extended time with them, receive catechetical instruction, and then they would be baptized naked. And the reason for this nakedness, is because they were showing just how radical their life was. They were changing the people they were spending time with. They were changing the information and the knowledge that they were learning from and investing in and seeking after. They were changing their entire life around. You think of the clergyman who probably baptized you, and who says, we submerged as in the death of Christ and raised into newness of life. And so naked baptism is not only teaching those doctrines to the new believer, but it's also reminding and giving courage to the older, mature believers, the adoption into Christ's family. It's a really beautiful picture. Now, the last example, the last type of rhetoric is epidictic rhetoric. That is rhetoric that revolves around individual characters who are either blamed or praised. Adam Ploy, who is a scholar at Yale Divinity School, believes St. Augustine, now remember St. Augustine lived during the Christianized Roman Empire. St. Augustine saw martyrs as culturally powerful artifacts and tools of communal memory and social persuasion. St. Augustine wanted to undermine this traditional idea of martyrs in order that martyrs would now be seen as a sign of living virtue, not dead virtue. Martyrs weren't fighting persecution, but they were fighting temptation and demonic power. St. Augustine revolutionized at this time what it meant to be a faithful Christian. And it's really cool how he can do that. And so the two biggest takeaways from our research and from this presentation are twofold. The first is the conversation. So this is the first rhetoric class, rhetoric books that I've ever read and anything like that. I've heard the term and kind of had an idea, but I really didn't know what rhetoric was. And so learning the terminology, learning the names of scholars, learning some of the important and urgent questions at hand, and I got to participate in a super minute way in the conversation. And so I'm super thankful for this class and thankful for you, Dr. Knight, for still fighting for us to do this class. I know it was kind of scary at the beginning of the year. But then the second thing is C.S. Lewis's Goodwill Rhetoric, which you probably recognize from James Bettle's seasoned speech. Bettler's seasoned speech. So C.S. Lewis, who is dubbed the apostle to the skeptics, is known in his speech and rhetoric for goodwill. And so what's this mean? It's two things. It means goodwill means a commitment to understanding the audience before him, and two, the commitment to bettering each and every person he stood before in some way. And so my goodwill hope, my goodwill try is to the audience, to you, in this presentation paper, to hopefully impress upon you and cause you to reflect and to search and realize is that rhetoric is for the glory of God and the good of others.